Hi, this is Phoenix, and I'm going to talk a little bit about philosophical agnosticism. Philosophical agnosticism is a concept that is often employed in philosophy, maybe not explicitly called philosophical agnosticism, but certainly a type of position that you find in philosophy and in philosophers, and in certain arguments and logical points of view that are portrayed. So you might be wondering how I personally define philosophical agnosticism. Well, certainly we have to think of religious agnosticism, which is the idea that you neither confirm nor deny in your mind the existence of a God or of a superior being. The very interesting thing about agnosticism in the context of religion is that it is often a kind of middle ground between the two extremes, especially when it comes to something like Christianity, specifically, where there is, and thinking of the tradition of the West, when thinking about atheists, such as the New Atheists, or thinking about fundamentalist Christians. I bring up agnosticism in this point of view because, as you can probably tell, our ideas have a certain degree of extremity to them, and depending on how you move on the spectrum, they can become more or less extreme. And the idea behind being agnostic is to kind of be a moderate, and have a moderate perspective. Now, of course, in religious agnosticism, you don't necessarily have to believe that you don't have to necessarily believe that you're in the middle and that there's only this spectrum of viewpoints between new atheism and religious fundamentalism. But I bring up that idea as a way of orienting yourself in agnosticism. And often the idea is that you don't necessarily believe in God, but you don't feel like you need to, while also remaining open to the possibilities. And I think agnosticism in a religious perspective is important for balancing our perspective and helping us realize our own perspective. But the more important point that I wanted to talk about is philosophical agnosticism itself. And the idea behind philosophical agnosticism is the idea that you are a moderate of more extreme views on a spectrum. And so this comes with any area of life, any of the questions that we may ask, and you find yourself being moderate in your position, very, very neutral. So how would this work in practice? Well, I would describe it as working in the sense that there are often two contrasting and opposite points of view in any given issue, and your goal is to be able to be somewhere in the middle and entertain ideas that you don't like. So you try to be moderate in your perspective and not necessarily say that one perspective or another perspective is right. You don't even necessarily say that your perspective is right, of being moderate. How it would work more in practice is certainly the idea that you have your agnostic perspective, and you have this agnosticism at least while entertaining arguments, so you can look at the ideas that are being portrayed and being argued for. And so often people think that it means if you're agnostic that you don't have your own perspective, you don't have your own opinions, values, and viewpoints. But certainly this is not true. The idea of agnosticism is simply to look at the ideas that are being presented, and as a side note, they may not always be contrasting or contradictory. That's more of just an easier way of looking at the issues. But regardless, you look at the ideas, and then once you understand both of the perspectives by using a kind of balanced perspective of agnosticism, of suspending your own beliefs and your own judgments, you're able to more correctly look at your own perspectives and judge your own perspectives and go from there. Now, I have to admit that philosophical agnosticism comes out of many traditions, but it is a viewpoint that you often find in philosophy, whether that is Socratic ignorance or any other kind of guise that it takes in philosophy, whether that is just general skepticism or certain types of skepticism, whether Kierkegaardian skepticism or Pyrrhonian skepticism, Cartesian skepticism, all of that is there. And it's really nice to be able to consult a rich history and tradition of philosophy to be able to create your own agnostic perspective and your own agnostic position. Now, I have to be frank about the way that I've used agnosticism in my life because it hasn't always been helpful. There was a period in my life, even recently, where I was so afraid of committing to any value or having any kind of commitment at all because I was afraid of being wrong. Because this is why you're agnostic in the first place, is because you want to look at other possibilities and you want to be as objective as you can. But I had taken this idea to the extreme, so essentially having my own agnostic extremism, so to speak, and that was and it had gotten to the point to where I didn't even have, to where I was afraid of asserting values, to where I thought that I didn't have any values, to where I thought that there was nothing in my life that I thought was important and worth fighting for. But certainly that was incorrect, because there are many things that I believe in that I think are worth fighting for, and in our often difficult world, we have to pursue truth, but we also have to balance that with asserting ourselves and having our own perspective. And honestly, if you're not careful with skepticism and with the skepticism that comes out of philosophy, you can arrive at this conclusion and think that you can't believe anything, because you basically say that nothing exists and that nothing is worth believing in, that all your beliefs are bogus. And honestly, I've had to learn how to balance those more intense and extreme ideas, because in the end, they don't really work. I mean, you could be skeptical to the extreme if you wanted, but you would have a hard time making any decision. You would, in a way, kind of ironically become just a mere automaton, because you wouldn't believe anything. You would just be going through life and not actually partaking and participating in what exists. And that was what I realized. I realized that philosophical agnosticism is important, but I also have to balance that perspective with my own thoughts and my own feelings about things, and that it's okay to assert those things, and that it's okay to be wrong in your assertions, simply because you have to assert something at certain times in your life, and that process is not bad. With all of that said, I would still argue that philosophical agnosticism is important, because it is a type of neutrality, philosophical neutrality, and allows you to look at ideas that you don't like, allow you to be more moderate in your beliefs, and it allows you to kind of tone the intensity down of some of your more intense ideas. I hope you enjoyed this talk. That was a brief discussion of philosophical agnosticism. If you're interested in my philosophy in general, you can find 2 of my books of philosophy on my Amazon author page at amazon.com/author/Phoenix_rises. And the 2 books that you can find are Equivalence and also In Defense of the Mind. And you can find both of those books on my page. And I hope that you check it out. This is Phoenix, and thank you for your time.